Imagine walking into a high-end restaurant expecting a warm welcome, only to be met with cold stares and judgment. One man experienced exactly that, but what happened next no one saw coming. Respect isn't about what you wear, it's about who you are. How would you react in this situation? Watch till the end to see how this shocking story unfolds. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. Leonardo DiCaprio had always been someone who enjoyed the simpler pleasures in life. Despite his global fame, the Oscar-winning actor preferred unpretentious experiences, walking through the streets unnoticed, stopping by small cafes, and disconnecting from the Hollywood chaos. Today was one of those days when he just wanted to be himself. The morning had started with a spontaneous idea, a solo hike in the mountains outside of Los Angeles. It had been a while since he had last gone on an adventure alone, without paparazzi, fans, or business calls interrupting his peace. He dressed casually, comfortable hiking boots, a plain t-shirt, and jeans, grabbed a water bottle, and drove out of the city, ready to enjoy the fresh mountain air. The first half of the hike was perfect. He took a winding trail surrounded by towering pines, listening to nothing but the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. It was a rare kind of serenity he could only find when he was far from the cameras and the artificial world of Hollywood. He climbed higher, enjoying the breathtaking view of Los Angeles in the distance. For a moment, he felt completely disconnected from the fame that followed him everywhere. But nature had its own plans. Clouds gathered overhead, dark and heavy, creeping over the horizon. Leonardo didn't think much of it at first. Los Angeles rarely got heavy rain, and even when it did, it usually passed quickly. However, within minutes, the sky opened up, and a sudden downpour drenched him instantly. There was no time to find shelter. The dirt beneath his feet quickly turned into thick mud, making it difficult to move without slipping. His boots, once sturdy and clean, sank into the wet ground. His jeans absorbed the water, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. His t-shirt clung to his skin, and within minutes, he looked as though he had fallen into a river. Laughing to himself, Leonardo shook his head. He had experienced worse situations, but this was certainly not how he had expected his peaceful day to go. His car was parked at the base of the trail, but the path back was now slick and treacherous. Carefully, he made his way down, gripping onto tree branches for balance. By the time he reached the bottom, he was exhausted, soaked, and covered in mud from his knees down. Getting into his car, he checked his phone. The time was later than he had thought, and hunger gnawed at him. The idea of returning home for a shower before eating sounded reasonable, but another thought crossed his mind. He had heard about a high-end restaurant in Beverly Hills that supposedly served the best steak in town. He had been meaning to try it, but had never gotten around to it. Glancing at himself in the rearview mirror, he smirked. He looked like someone who had just survived a survival show rather than an A-list actor. His hair was wet and messy, his face had specks of dirt on it, and his clothes were in terrible shape. He could already imagine the judgmental looks he would get walking into an upscale restaurant dressed like this, but that only made the idea more amusing. With a shrug, he started the car and drove toward Beverly Hills. The drive was uneventful, though he did get a few odd looks from other drivers when he stopped at red lights. His car, a sleek black electric vehicle, was spotless, in direct contrast to his disheveled appearance. The irony wasn't lost on him. As he pulled up to the restaurant, he immediately noticed the ambiance. The valet parking area was filled with luxury cars, and the entrance exuded exclusivity. A uniformed valet stepped forward to open his door, but the moment Leonardo stepped out, the young man hesitated, His eyes flickered over Leonardo's muddy jeans and damp shirt before quickly recovering his professional composure. "Good evening, sir. Would you like me to park your car?" the valet asked cautiously, though his expression suggested he wasn't sure whether Leonardo was actually supposed to be there. Leonardo simply smiled. "Yeah, thanks, man." Handing over his keys, he walked toward the entrance, ignoring the hushed whispers from well-dressed guests standing outside. The moment he pushed open the doors, the atmosphere shifted. The restaurant was elegant. High ceilings, chandeliers casting warm golden light, and tables occupied by the wealthy elite. Conversations were soft and refined, the air filled with the scent of fine dining. And then there was him. The contrast was stark, and it did not go unnoticed. Heads turned, eyes widened, and expressions shifted from mild curiosity to outright disapproval. He could hear the murmurs beginning already, quiet but unmistakable. He barely took 2 steps inside before a young woman in a crisp white uniform intercepted him. She was a hostess, her blonde hair styled in a perfect bun, her posture straight and professional. However, the way she eyed him up and down made it clear she had already judged him. "Good evening, sir," she said, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "Do you have a reservation?" Leonardo, still amused, nodded. "Not today, but I figured I'd drop by and try your famous steak." Her smile faltered, and for a split second he saw hesitation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out how to handle the situation without outright telling him to leave. "Unfortunately," she began carefully, "we have a strict dress code. I'm afraid we can't accommodate guests in—" She gestured vaguely at his clothes. "Casual attire." Leonardo tilted his head. "Casual?" He looked down at himself. "Well, yeah, I guess I'm not exactly dressed for the Oscars." The hostess forced another tight smile. "I'm really sorry, but we do have policies in place." Before he could respond, another voice cut in. "Is there a problem here?" A second woman approached, older than the hostess, dressed in a sharp black suit that screamed authority. The manager. Her expression was unreadable, but the way she assessed Leonardo was nearly identical. Calculated and disapproving. "Not at all," the hostess replied quickly, stepping aside as the manager took her place. The woman in the black suit didn't waste time. "Sir, this is a high-end establishment. If you'd like, we can recommend a more casual dining experience that might be better suited for you." Leonardo raised an eyebrow. "And by more casual, you mean?" She didn't even hesitate. "Something more appropriate for someone in your attire." There it was. The polite way of saying, "You don't belong here." Leonardo took a slow breath. He could feel the weight of countless eyes on him, the way the staff and guests were watching, waiting to see what he would do. He had expected some pushback, but he hadn't expected it to be this blatant. He wasn't just being turned away. He was being dismissed. And that was something he didn't appreciate. With a calm, almost amused expression, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, then tapped a name. As he lifted the phone to his ear, he glanced at the manager, who was still standing with her arms crossed, convinced she had handled the situation. "Hey, buddy," Leonardo said into the phone. "I'm at a restaurant in Beverly Hills. You know the one." The hostess and manager exchanged a glance. "I think they might need a reminder of who they serve," he continued. "Mind giving them a call?" The manager's confident expression faltered slightly, but she quickly masked it. "Who exactly are you calling?" she asked, her voice suddenly less firm. Leonardo smiled. "Your boss." The air inside the restaurant was thick with tension. Leonardo stood calmly, his phone still pressed to his ear, while the hostess and manager exchanged uncertain glances. The soft hum of conversation among the patrons had quieted, replaced by hushed whispers and stolen glances in his direction. A few guests had even discreetly taken out their phones, sensing that something interesting was unfolding. The manager, still trying to maintain control over the situation, straightened her posture and cleared her throat. "Sir," she said with forced politeness, "there's no need for any—" She stopped mid-sentence when her own phone buzzed in her pocket. Her expression stiffened. Slowly, she pulled it out, glanced at the caller ID, and immediately paled. Leonardo watched with mild amusement as she hesitated before finally answering. "Yes, this is Angela," she said, her voice noticeably quieter than before. "Yes, he's here." A brief silence followed as she listened to the voice on the other end. Whatever was being said clearly wasn't what she had expected. Her back straightened, and she quickly turned away from Leonardo, stepping a few feet aside to continue the conversation in hushed tones. The hostess beside her looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly together in front of her. Leonardo casually leaned against the sleek, polished counter near the entrance, his arms crossed. He could still hear snippets of the conversation. "No, I wasn't aware. Of course not, sir. No, we didn't mean—" Another pause. The manager nodded rapidly, despite the person on the other end not being able to see her. "Understood. Yes. I'll take care of it immediately." She ended the call and took a slow, deep breath before turning back to face Leonardo. The confidence that had once been in her eyes was gone, replaced by unease. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if she wanted to straighten her blazer but thought better of it. "Mr. DiCaprio," she began, her tone completely different from before. Softer, almost nervous. I apologize for the misunderstanding. Of course, we'd be happy to accommodate you." Leonardo arched an eyebrow. "Interesting. A minute ago, I was being told to find somewhere more appropriate." "What changed?" The hostess swallowed hard, looking like she wanted to disappear. The manager hesitated before giving him a tight smile. "It seems there was a miscommunication. We value all of our guests, and I assure you that your presence here is more than welcome. Please allow me to personally escort you to one of our finest tables." Leonardo didn't move right away. He let the silence stretch, watching as the manager shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. He could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant on them, waiting to see what he would do next. Then, with an easy smile, he pushed off the counter and slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Nah," he said simply. The manager blinked. Excuse me?" Leonardo turned slightly, scanning the restaurant. The crystal chandeliers gleamed overhead, casting a golden glow over the carefully arranged tables, each adorned with pristine white tablecloths and polished silverware. The guests, most of whom had been silently enjoying their expensive meals just moments ago, were now watching with barely concealed curiosity. He met the gaze of a man in an expensive suit sitting near the entrance, who quickly looked away, pretending to be focused on his glass of wine. Another table, occupied by a group of well-dressed women, had gone completely silent, their expressions ranging from intrigued to guilty amusement. "Yeah," Leonardo continued, looking back at the manager. "I think I'll pass. I've suddenly lost my appetite." A flicker of panic crossed her face. "Mr. DiCaprio, please." But he was already turning toward the exit. Before he could reach the door, however, a voice called out from one of the nearby tables. "Honestly, I don't blame you." Leonardo stopped and turned toward the speaker. a man in his 50s dressed in a tailored navy blue suit. He had an expensive watch on his wrist and a glass of red wine in his hand. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "I come here all the time," he continued, gesturing toward the restaurant, "and I've seen how they treat people who don't look the part. It's not the first time, and I doubt it'll be the last." The manager's expression darkened. "Sir, I don't think that's—" The man ignored her, raising his glass slightly in Leonardo's direction. "You've got the right idea, DiCaprio. This place isn't as classy as it pretends to be." A murmur rippled through the room. Some guests exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Others, however, seemed to be agreeing, nodding subtly, shifting in their seats. A few began to stand up, reaching for their coats. The manager, realizing what was happening, quickly tried to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, there's no need to—" But it was too late. One by one, several guests got up from their tables, abandoning their meals. A woman in a red dress shot the manager a cold look before linking her arm with the man in the navy blue suit. "Let's go somewhere that actually values their customers," she muttered. Another man, dressed in an expensive black tuxedo, placed his napkin down and stood as well. "I think I've had enough of this place, too." Within moments, at least half a dozen patrons were making their way toward the exit. The manager stood frozen, watching helplessly as some of the restaurant's wealthiest clientele walked out the door. Leonardo, standing just inside the entrance, smirked. He could feel the weight of the moment, the subtle but undeniable shift in the air. He turned back to the manager one last time. "Next time," he said casually, "maybe don't judge people so quickly." And with that, he walked out into the night, the doors swinging shut behind him. Outside, the valet was already waiting with his car. He handed Leonardo the keys with a sheepish smile, clearly aware of what had just gone down inside. "Crazy night, huh?" Leonardo chuckled as he got into the driver's seat. "Yeah," he said, shaking his head. "Something like that." As he pulled away from the curb, he glanced at the rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of the restaurant. Through the glass windows, he could still see the staff scrambling, the manager frantically speaking to a server, the empty tables left behind by the departing guests. He smirked. Maybe next time they'd remember. The restaurant's once luxurious atmosphere now felt tense and uneasy. The manager stood frozen near the entrance, still processing the disaster that had unfolded before her eyes. The sight of Leonardo DiCaprio walking out, followed by some of the wealthiest patrons, was a blow she had not anticipated. The hostess beside her fidgeted, clearly shaken by the sudden shift in the restaurant's usually controlled environment. The remaining guests continued to murmur amongst themselves, some exchanging glances of discomfort, while others whispered about what had just transpired. A few had even begun discreetly checking their phones, no doubt already seeing the situation spread online. One of the waitresses, a young woman with dark curls pulled into a tight bun, cautiously approached the manager. "Angela?" she said quietly, glancing towards the nearly half-empty restaurant. "Should we do something?" The manager, Angela, forced a tight-lipped smile, though her fingers trembled as she smoothed the front of her blazer. "No," she replied stiffly, "everything is under control." But nothing was under control. Angela turned abruptly and strode toward the back office, ignoring the whispers of the remaining staff. The moment she stepped inside and shut the door behind her, she let out a slow breath, pressing her fingertips to her temple. She had handled difficult situations before, but this was different. This wasn't just an irritated guest or a minor complaint. This was Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the most famous men in Hollywood, walking out of her restaurant in front of a crowd, and worse, taking some of their best-paying customers with him. Her phone buzzed again. She already knew who it was before she even checked the screen. With a sense of dread curling in her stomach, she answered. "Sir," she greeted, trying to keep her voice steady. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Angela," the owner of the restaurant said, "what the hell happened?" She swallowed hard. "There was a misunderstanding," she said carefully, choosing her words with precision. "Mr. DiCaprio arrived unexpectedly, and due to the dress code—" "You turned away Leonardo DiCaprio," the owner cut in, his tone sharp. "Do you have any idea how bad this looks?" Angela clenched her jaw. "Sir, he was covered in mud. He looked—" "I don't care how he looked," the owner interrupted. "Do you realize this is already online? There are pictures, videos. People are talking." Angela quickly pulled up her phone, her fingers moving hastily as she opened social media. And there it was. Several posts had already gained traction, accompanied by blurry photos of Leonardo standing inside the restaurant, the tension in the air practically visible through the images. Some captions were blunt, others sarcastic. "Restaurant in Beverly Hills denies service to Leonardo DiCaprio for not looking rich enough. Classy. Imagine kicking out an Oscar winner because he had a little dirt on his shirt. Priorities. I guess you have to wear a tux just to eat here. What a joke." Angela's stomach twisted. The backlash was happening in real time. The owner continued speaking, his voice sharp with irritation. "I don't care what excuse you have. Fix this. Immediately." Angela gritted her teeth. "Yes, sir." The call ended, leaving her staring blankly at the screen. This was bad. She inhaled deeply before straightening her shoulders and marching back into the dining area. The remaining customers eyed her warily, some still murmuring amongst themselves. The staff shifted uncomfortably as she approached the hostess station, her expression unreadable. "Start offering complimentary desserts to the remaining tables," she ordered quietly. "Something expensive. And send a round of drinks to the guests who stayed." The hostess hesitated before nodding. She relayed the instructions to the nearby waitresses, who quickly moved to follow orders. Angela turned toward the bar, where a few of the restaurant's more exclusive patrons had gathered, their conversations hushed but unmistakably centered around what had just happened. She forced another smile, walking toward them with measured steps. "I want to personally apologize for the disturbance earlier," she said smoothly, her tone carefully controlled. "We deeply value your presence here and would love to offer you something special on the house tonight." A few of the guests exchanged glances, some skeptical, others indifferent. One woman, dressed in an emerald green evening gown, sipped her wine before speaking. "It's not us you should be apologizing to," she said coolly. Angela's smile didn't falter, but something in her expression hardened. She knew what she had to do. Excusing herself, she stepped away and pulled out her phone once more. There was only one way to attempt to salvage the restaurant's reputation. She needed to reach out to Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo drove through the streets of Los Angeles with one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually against the car door. The city lights reflected off the windshield as he cruised through Beverly Hills, the tension from earlier fading into amusement. He had dealt with pretentious people before, but the way that manager had dismissed him purely based on appearance had been something else. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He glanced at the screen. An unknown number. He let it ring. A few seconds later, a notification popped up. New voicemail. Shaking his head, he reached over and pressed play. "Mr. DiCaprio, This is Angela, the manager from earlier. I wanted to personally apologize for any misunderstanding that took place tonight. Please allow us to make it up to you. We'd be honored to have you back as our guest, at your convenience, of course. Again, my sincerest apologies for the incident. We greatly appreciate you." Leonardo chuckled to himself. That was fast. He could practically hear the desperation in her voice. No doubt the restaurant's owner had called and put pressure on her to clean up the mess. A second notification appeared on his screen, a text message. Angela, restaurant manager. Mr. DiCaprio, I deeply regret tonight's events. We'd love the opportunity to make things right. Please let me know how we can accommodate you. He rolled his eyes. Now they wanted to accommodate him. Now that the damage was already done. His fingers hovered over the screen as he considered responding. He could easily ignore it, let the restaurant deal with the fallout of their own actions. But something about the whole situation annoyed him more than it should have. It wasn't just about him. It was about how they treated people in general. How many other guests had been turned away just because they didn't fit the image the restaurant wanted to maintain. He pulled into a parking lot near a quiet cafe he had visited before. A far cry from the luxurious restaurant he had just left behind, but at least here, people were treated with respect regardless of what they were wearing. He stepped inside, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods greeting him instantly. A few customers sat at small tables, engaged in quiet conversations. The staff, busy behind the counter, barely looked up as he entered. No judgment, no scrutiny. Just a normal place with normal people. As he waited for his order, his phone vibrated again. Another text. Angela, restaurant manager. We'd also like to extend an invitation to discuss how we can ensure such incidents don't happen again. Please let us know if you'd be open to a conversation. Leonardo exhaled through his nose. They were really trying. Taking his coffee, he walked to an empty table, sat down, and thought for a moment before finally typing a response. Leonardo, it's not about me. It's about how you treat people. I don't need a free meal, but maybe next time don't judge someone by their clothes. He pressed send and placed the phone screen down on the table. He doubted she'd have a good response to that. A few minutes later, as he sipped his coffee, his phone buzzed again. This time he didn't check it immediately. Whatever she had to say, it wouldn't change the fact that the restaurant had revealed its true colors. And now the whole world was watching. The fallout from the restaurant incident spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. By the next morning, social media was flooded with posts, comments, and articles dissecting every detail of what had happened. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into a headline-worthy scandal. The restaurant that once prided itself on exclusivity was now being publicly dragged for its blatant elitism. Leonardo woke up to a barrage of notifications on his phone. Friends, colleagues, even people he hadn't spoken to in years were messaging him about the incident. Some found it hilarious, others were outraged on his behalf, but most just wanted to hear his side of the story. He ignored the majority of the messages, already knowing that the situation had taken on a life of its own. What did interest him, however, was the public's response. As he scrolled through his feed, he saw countless comments from people sharing their own experiences of being turned away from upscale restaurants for not looking rich enough or being judged based on their appearance. The conversation had shifted from being just about him to something much bigger. Meanwhile, the restaurant's reputation was in freefall. The official Instagram page had been flooded with angry comments, and their Yelp reviews had plummeted overnight. People were calling for boycotts, and some had even posted screenshots of canceled reservations. It was clear that the damage had been done. Angela, the manager, had sent yet another message. Angela, restaurant manager, Mr. DiCaprio, I understand your frustration. I assure you, this is not how we intend to treat our guests. We'd love the opportunity to meet with you and discuss how we can address this publicly. Please let us know if you're open to a conversation. Leonardo sighed. It was obvious they were now trying to control the damage, but at this point, the situation was beyond repair. He wasn't interested in helping them clean up their mess. Still, he figured he should at least say something. He wasn't one for public drama, but he knew his silence could be misinterpreted. Opening Twitter, he typed a simple message. Respect isn't about what you wear. It's about how you treat people. Think about that. Within minutes, the tweet exploded. Thousands of likes, retweets, and replies flooded in. Some people praised him for standing up against elitism. Others shared their own stories of discrimination in high-end establishments. The message resonated far beyond what he had expected. Hours later, an official statement from the restaurant was released. We sincerely apologize to Mr. DiCaprio and anyone who felt unwelcome at our establishment. We take this matter seriously and will be reviewing our policies to ensure that all of our guests are treated with the utmost respect, regardless of appearance. We value inclusivity and deeply regret any offense caused. Leonardo read the statement but didn't react. It was exactly what he expected, a carefully worded attempt at damage control. But the truth was, their policies weren't the problem. Their attitude was. By the evening, the restaurant's owner reached out personally, leaving him a voicemail asking to meet. Leonardo didn't bother calling back. The moment had passed, and he had no interest in being part of their PR strategy. Instead, he drove back to the small cafe he had visited the night before. He ordered a coffee, sat by the window, and watched as people came and went, some in expensive suits, others in casual clothes, all of them treated the same. That, he thought, was how it should always be. As he took a sip of his coffee, a young couple at the counter caught his eye. The woman, dressed in an old hoodie and jeans, handed the cashier a few crumpled bills. The cashier didn't bat an eye, just took the money and gave her change with a smile. Leonardo smirked to himself. No dress codes, no judgment, no VIP treatment, just people being people. And that, he decided, was the kind of place worth supporting. What do you think? Was this the right way to handle the situation? This story reminds us all that true respect isn't about expensive clothes or flashy appearances. It's about how we treat one another. Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.